Welcome back to Kelvarn's Ponderings. In this episode, I've decided to look at the hypocrisy of the left, specifically in how it attacks the right and the hypocrisy of those on the right. For those who don't know, within the last week or so was Politicon. One of the key debates was Cenk Uygur versus Ben Shapiro. Most people thought that Ben Shapiro probably won the debate. I would argue that Ben did a better job than Cenk. Not that hard. But at the same time, Cenk kept hitting on Ben as to how hypocritical he was. You know, Ben's all for small government up until it comes time for a war. And Cenk was just like, admit that. Here's the problem with that. There's an old quote, those who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. When you look at the hypocrisy of the left, we can go with how they attacked Milo because of some comments he made. Comments that some people, when you take them out of context, would say he was endorsing pedophilia. He really wasn't. Now, when you look at the left, they are endorsing pedophilia. They are endorsing the act of pedophiles. I don't know. I mean, some of it makes me sick, but they endorse some of the worst behavior in human beings. And then turn around, just like Cenk, and say, well, you're the hypocrite. To a certain extent, most human beings are hypocritical. We're not 100% consistent in really much of anything. There might be a few. There might not. I haven't met everybody on the planet. I couldn't say definitively there are. Those I have met, I've always found to have some level of hypocrisy. The problem isn't the hypocrisy itself. Ben Shapiro continually dodged the idea of him being a hypocrite, wanting small government, but a large military force. Not necessarily hypocritical, at least in my opinion, me being an advocate for the military on multiple levels, including being a veteran. But at the same time, there is a point where you have to sit there and say, okay, enough is enough. As I have stated numerous times outside of YouTube, in my normal life, there's always a balance that has to be maintained in everything. The problem isn't advocating for a strong military. The problem is when it gets taken to an extreme. Anything taken to an extreme tends to become, even a good idea taken to an extreme is a bad idea. looking at some of the talking points of the debate, they talk about some of the social programs, Social Security. If you look, Social Security was there to cover for the elderly who lost everything. They didn't have anything set aside, so they covered for them. At the time, that was a good idea. In that context of covering for those who didn't have anything socked away was good. But then it continued on, generation after generation. So some could call it a socialized retirement program. Not really a good idea. I could sit there and point out that the government does not do a good job in much of anything when it comes to its citizens, especially not social programs. And the left is big proponents for social programs. Chang is big for socialized medicine, socialized, education. But when you look at the programs, they don't work well. The hypocrisy of the left is that they advocate for big government in government involvement in everything. Yeah, like I said, when you look at the social programs, welfare, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, these things do not work well. If Social Security was just a one-off, cover those who were hit hard, it would no longer exist. The money that is collected over a person's lifetime could then have been, I want to say it could have been put into retirement funds, but the truth of the matter is not everybody would think that far ahead. Most people won't. Which is why creating it as a socialized retirement fund, while I would say the idea has merit, the practice fails. Socialized medicine. The idea has merit, the practice fails. Ben Shapiro is right in that having competition for the money in that arena drives prices down. But it sometimes, one of the biggest problems I've had with the free market is it also allows for the invitation of illegal dealings. Getting labor at the cheapest possible price, even to the point of bringing illegals over. You see that sometimes. Now the market corrects itself with ICE. No big deal, but it doesn't always correct itself like that. one of Chank's biggest points that he stuck to hard was that the time of the biggest growth in U.S. history was the time of the largest tax on the rich. Well, I'm going to Google the growth of the government in the 1950s. And I, of course, Googled government growth 1950s. In the 1950s, the overall economy grew by 37%. Like Shapiro mentioned, that's because we were the only ones manufacturing anything. Unfortunately, everything I see let's see. Everything I see says nothing about the growth of the actual growth of the government. But I do see that a lot of the expenditures were redirected into highway, airport, and social welfare programs, which, as Shapiro pointed out, is 66% of the federal budget. But what I'm seeing what I've been seeing in my Googling disproves a lot of what the left says. You know, we spend a lot of money on the military, but as a percentage of the budget, in less than 100 years, it's gone from half to a fifth. So from 50% to 20%. Social programs is increased. You look at it, even in the 50s, we went from manufacturing, grants like that, putting money into infrastructure, manufacturing, jobs, not government jobs, jobs by businesses, jobs of businesses owned by private citizens. And you see a stagnation. Yes, you see a growth of the economy, but it's stagnant when compared to the years when we're investing in private sector jobs, private sector, anything seems to be better for growing the economy than public sector or government jobs. Which destroys Chank's point of the time we had the biggest growth, we had the most taxes. Because what you often see is it takes a while to shift. You know, it's not just a shift in, okay, you know, people are paying 91% in taxes. They're not going to try and grow their business as much. Or maybe they'll try to grow their businesses a great deal. I don't know. It all depends upon whether they want to take the risk. Some would, some wouldn't. Now that I think about it, you know, you only get to keep 9% of your income. Why wouldn't you try to increase that amount of income? But also at the same time, the moral structure of the country and most of the people, they were more willing to help each other. You might keep an employee on who nowadays would be fired because they're friendly or they're a friend, something like that. But looking at what Chank said versus what I'm finding is there has to be something else to it. Yeah, we grew. And then the stagnation of the 60s. People talk about the 50s the stagnation of the 70s. People talk about the 50s and how much it grew. The problem with it is in 54 and 58, there were 2 recessions. So something isn't quite right with what Chank is saying. I'm a little bit off topic, so I'm going to move back. But the whole time, Cenk is sitting there. He's saying the hypocrisy of the right, the hypocrisy of the right. And it's a soundbite, because when you look at Cenk, he's at least as hypocritical. You know, he sits there, he makes a claim, then he says, Google it. I'm sorry, it's on the person who makes the claim to actually provide proof of the claim. What he's doing is he's making a claim, an unsubstantiated claim. Then he's saying, Google it, knowing full well most people won't. Those who believe him will continue to believe him. Those who do not, some might look it up, some might not. I looked up the growth, 30%. That's not all that big. I mean, 200 billion GDP to 300 billion-ish, or it was over 200 billion to a little less than 320 billion. In terms of the US, that's going from about $600 a person to $1,000 a person in a year. That's current population. Now, in 50 years, we've done almost 10 times that. It makes me wonder. The hypocrisy of the left is the left points to these little facets, these small little things that help to prove their point. But when you widen the context, you see it doesn't hold as well. The whole time they sit there and they call hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. Yet when they're caught doing things, their answer is, hey, not everybody's like that. Or, you know, people make mistakes. My biggest issue with the hypocrisy of the left isn't the fact that they're hypocrites. I think most people's problem with the left isn't the fact that they're hypocrites. It's the fact that they continually say the same things, point the same way, call hypocrite on others. And when they're caught being a hypocrite, it's okay. It's forgivable. The biggest sin of the left and its hypocrisy isn't calling the hypocrisy of others. It's being unwilling to forgive the hypocrisy of others, while at the same time demanding you forgive theirs. you want to talk about the hypocrisy of the right, all you have to do is look at the Young Turks or any mainstream news channel. But to talk about the hypocrisy of the left is to sit there and note how they do these things, how they call hypocrite, bigot, sexist, racist, even to the point that it's not actually true. The hypocrisy of the left is far worse, because not only are they calling others hypocrites, they dare to call people names, falsely accuse them of things that aren't true, change definitions to suit what they want. And when you hold them to the same standard, you're the horrible person. So I have a question. This is the thing I've been pondering since I came up with this. Who's more of a hypocrite? The person who's sometimes hypocritical? Or the hypocrite who tries to hold others accountable for their hypocrisy, yet refuses to be held accountable themselves? I've said it before in the podcast towards John Boyega. Never make an exception for yourself. Never make yourself the exception. Or make yourself an exception. People have lost faith in the left because the left holds others to a high standard, but won't allow you to hold them to the standard. So in answer to the question, who's the more hypocritical? Well, that's the one who refuses to be held to account to the level that they hold others to account. That's just my thoughts. Comment if you agree, disagree, why, where do you think I went right? Where do you think I went wrong? I'm always open to a good discussion, though it might take me a while to get back to you. Such is life. I'm a busy man. But again, like, comment, subscribe, have fun, enjoy yourselves. And when someone starts calling you a hypocrite, trying to hold you to account, ask them if they're willing to hold themselves to that same standard. When they sit there and they tell you to behave in a certain way, say, show me first. I believe it, Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. Well, the most accurate interpretation of that is, don't tell others how to live. Live it yourself. Well, thank you for listening to my ponderings. As always, I would say question both sides. Find out the lies of both sides. Hold them to the account. Hold them at least to the same account that you would hold yourself. Preferably hold yourself to a high account so that you can justify holding them to a high account. And as always, learn, watch, grow. The red pill is nothing more than being honest with how reality is, even if you don't like it. And remember to take the red pill.